What's up, my riggers? Okay, so today we've got this model done by Akmal of Malzeno from Monster Hunter, and he was asking about how to prepare the mesh for 3D printing, right? So for 3D printing, typically we okay, let me show you this, right? For 3D printing, we cannot have holes in our mesh, right? We want it to be watertight, and what that means is that the mesh needs to be a solid piece that cannot be holes, right? So if you just look at this, you may think that it's fine and all that until you bring it to the 3D printing software, but nowadays Zbrush has this add-on called the 3D Print Hub, right? So you can find it under plugins, 3D Print Hub, and you simply click check mesh volume, okay? Now it will tell us that the current tool is not a solid and they cannot compute the volume. Right, so this tells us that there is actually a microscopic holes somewhere on the mesh. It's not fully sealed up, right? So it cannot go into the 3D print slicing software. So in order to fix that, we actually need to correct the mesh, okay? So I'll just pick on the arms, right? I'm just going to bring the arms over to a new file, right? I'm going to isolate the arms, and I'm going to bring the claws over as well. So copy and paste. Right, so we've got these two pieces of mesh, because when I 3D print, I kind of want to merge or bring in pieces together so that I have less parts to 3D print, right? So now that we've got these two meshes in place, I'm only wanting to do one half of the arm. Right, I don't need both. I'll just do it on one. Hold on. Right, so typically when we are doing our raw sculpt, right, at the beginning phases, you will use something like Sculptress or perhaps even Dynamesh to create your initial raw sculpture, right? So you will typically end up with topology that looks like this, right? This kind of stuff is good for just sculpting, but it's not usable in any other software. Like, you can't rig this, doesn't have good topology. You can 3D print this if the holes are closed, but it's very difficult to find all the holes in this mesh, right? You can try to press the close holes button, but that doesn't necessarily work all the time. Let's take a look whether it works or not. Right, okay, so that the close holes portion works. So if that works, you can actually just do that as well, right? But there's a better way to clean up your mesh so that you can bring it into other softwares as well besides just 3D printing. So I'll show you how to generate a clean mesh from a raw sculpt like this, right? So what we want to do is we actually gonna duplicate the arm and duplicate the claw, right? And I'm going to merge the arm and the claw together, right? So I'm going to simply merge down. So I have a mesh that is combined, right, like this, okay? And then I'm going to Dynamesh it together so that it's one shell. Dynamesh. Right? So now it's one congruent shell, right? We can see. So the claws and the arm is merged together, right? And then I'm going to start simplifying the mesh just to make sure that the holes are closed. Right, so I'm simply going to press Z remesher with the adaptive density button, with the adaptive density turned on. Let it run. Right, so we have something that looks like this, right? This is a lot easier to make adjustments and to handle. If you want, we can halve it one more time just to see what we get. Okay, so we have something like this. Perhaps this is a bit too much. Yeah, okay, this one's better, right? So we have something that looks like this, and this is very clear that we have no holes in this. Okay, oops, I just saw something. Got a bit extra stuff in here. Don't need those. Right. So this is the kind of easier to work with the low-res type of mesh that we want, right? It's a lot easier to maneuver, to make adjustments and stuff like that. Then you would ask yourself, this doesn't look like the original, right? All the details are gone. Let's check whether this thing has good volume. Yeah, so by right we should have a message like this where they can compute the volumes for us, right? So we know that this mesh is watertight, right? And it's and we can scrub through actually, right? Like, let me show you how to do that later, right? So we want to, from this stage, we actually want to bring in all of the detail back in, right? So we turn on our non-solo mode and we turn on the other parts of the dragon. All right, let me just get rid of this thing, this other stuff. Oops. Right. So we have the raw sculpt. Let me just rename this raw arm, raw claws, and the clean mesh. Right? You can use the Z remeasure method to generate a cleaner mesh like this, or you can also, go into Maya and use a quad draw to redraw it if you do need the correct topology. Let's say you are required to bring this to rig or something, right? Then you would bring this to Maya, retopo, and then bring it back to Zbrush, and then I'll show you how to bring back all the details. You have a low res mesh that looks something like this, right? So the next part is we want to bring in all the details. So this is how to do it. It's called projections, right? So I'll simply go down to your sub tool. At the bottom you have this button called project. You can project geometry. If you are using polypaint, you can also project the colors over from the sculpts over, right? So I'm going to project these two, raw arm and raw claws, onto the clean mesh. Okay, so you need to select the clean mesh, right? You need to have all the parts that you want visible. Right, it works by visibility. So what you can see, it will simply copy over, right? And then we simply press project, and you can see that the geometry actually shifts to match, right? It starts to look a little bit more like what the original was, right? But it's not fully there yet. Okay, so we need to actually subdivide the model, right? So under geometry, you can click higher res to create a new subdivision level. You press divide, sorry. You press divide to create a new subdivision level. So now you've got two levels, right? Once you make a higher level, you simply project it, turn on the visibility, then you project again, right? And we can see the mesh slowly start to take shape. Of course, along the way, there will be small errors and all that, right? Where it fails to capture, you can simply press project again to try to capture the detail, or at this stage, you can actually still sculpt, right? What I typically do is I will just inflate the areas slightly that did not manage to capture, right? Just inflate and smooth a little bit, inflate and smooth a little bit, smooth it up and inflate to get rid of all the jagged parts, right? You can inflate and smooth again, and then you simply press project, right? Then you can check whether you got it all, right? So I did not get it all. Inflate. Of course, it works by a radius. Now, of course, you can set the distance for the projection here as well, right? But sometimes you don't need all of it. There's just small parts that you can just manually fix yourself, right? You project it back. Right. I mean, you don't really need to 100% get it all. Of course, you can still sculpt on top of this anyway, right? You may still probably need to do some refinements as you go along, right? Yeah. So I'm going to go another projection, right? I'll go up another level and project again, right? So you can easily fix these parts that go off a little bit, right? Change the material so you can see what we're doing. Okay, so it's still a bit jagged, so I'm going to create another division. So now we're at level 4, right? And then I'm going to project again, right? So we're going to check it, right? So you can see that the mesh becomes more and more detailed, and we have the ability to scrub through the layers, right? And we are still at congruent volume, right? We still have no holes in our mesh, right? So you simply keep doing this until you get the amount of detail that you want. Maybe we can do one more control key for subdivide, and then we project it again. Right. Okay, so now it's very crisp. Of course, there's still some errors, but you guys know how to fix that, right? You can simply go down, clean up, right? So there will be small errors that will still show up, right? All you just need to do is you can inflate it, right? Smooth it out. Smooth it out. Smooth out all these jagged parts. Perhaps we inflate it a bit so that it can capture the detail. Right, then we turn back on the thing, and then we simply project it back. Yeah, so it will attempt to fix it, you see. So it's a lot better than just now. So we can smooth it out again. Right. Inflate just this part. Right. And then we can project it back. Oops. Sometimes it does that. Also, side note, you can actually project, you can actually mask project also, just in case you want to preserve some parts. Right? Yes, okay. So we mask this part, invert it, turn on visibility, we project the detail back. So we can do some sort of spot projections like that also, just to fix up the minor errors, right? Of course, you need to take the time to go and fix up the rest of it, right? But it's just an example. Right? I don't really like the look of this. But you get the point, right? You get the idea. Right? Well, I'll leave this for you guys to do, right? So once we have a clean once we've captured all our details, of course, we may not even need our raw sculpt anymore. We can continue to refine the mesh, right? We can continue to refine the sculpt. At this stage, while you are sculpting, you should not be using Sculptress or Dynamesh anymore, right? You are simply gonna use Subdivide if you need more geometry, okay? Because it preserves the quartz, right? This preserves the quartz, and it doesn't generate holes, right? It doesn't generate holes. So the whole point is that you already close up all the holes. You don't want to make any more holes, so you do not use Sculptress or Dynamesh, right? At this stage, you should more or less be done with your sculpt anyway. This is more like a cleanup and repair stage, so you should not really do any sort of major reconstruction at this stage, right? This is just to prepare the model for 3D printing. Right? So eventually you will have something that looks like this, right? Right? Eventually you will have something that looks like this, which is a clean mesh with all the holes sealed up versus this with the very crusty topology, right? This one looks a lot better. And if you are using this for animation, right, your topology should be even better than what the Z remesher generated, right? You should do it properly, but you can still transfer all the details over from a low-res mesh to a high-res mesh using the same method, okay? Right, so once we have this done, we can actually bring it back into the original sculpt, right? Clean mesh, right? And then we have a clean version of the arm inside. And so what you would do is you would go through all the parts of the model and do the same thing. Okay, you would just simply clean up this way, so all the holes are sealed. And you can merge multiple parts together also. So like perhaps the fur and the body can be one piece, right? The claws and the wing parts and the membrane can be like one piece as well, depending on how you want to cut up your model, right? Depending on how you want to 3D print it, right? Also, one thing to do before you finalize the 3D print is that some softwares might not be able to take the subdivision levels, right? So So you may need to actually just delete all the lower subdivisions in order to send it for 3D printing, right? So that it is actual mesh now, right? It is actually mesh and not subdivision levels or displacement maps, right? 3D printing cannot handle displacement or normal maps, so they require the mesh to really be mesh. So you will do all your corrections first before you delete your subdivision levels and send it off to the printer. Okay. So yeah, so this is how you actually clean up your mesh and prepare your model for 3D printing. There's another part about engineering for 3D printing where we put in the plugs and all of the keys for when we are cutting up the model, because sometimes you don't want to print the model in one piece, you want to print it in separate pieces, so we need to actually create those joints or keys so that they can slot into each other, and that I'll leave for another lesson, right? So thanks for listening. Hope you learned something, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!